This is the minor side of life. And now, Rob Sternberg.
Thank you, Pete, and we're so glad you're with us here on the minor side of life. This is, of course, where we talk candidly about the business and promotional aspects of minor league sports. Each episode you'll hear from a different guest who's either worked in a minor league office or played or performs on the minor league stage. We talk about how they got started, what they've learned, and some opinions and personal stories along the way. If you've worked in minor league sports or want to know what it's like, then this is the show for you. For me, though, from the Texas League and the Eastern League to the PCL and now the International League, I'll bring almost a decade of minor league baseball stories and experience to the table, and very much looking forward to sharing them with you. We've got a good steady flow of content coming your way here on the minor side. This show today I was looking forward to for a while, and same goes for the one we'll do next week with Anthony Serratelli. Telly, as they called him, played for about 10 years in professional baseball. He's a real underdog story in that he was cut from his team in high school and soon, found himself batting .500 for him. He walked on at Seton Hall and wound up a fixture in the lineup for 4 seasons. He went undrafted, played indie ball, and wound up reaching AAA here in the States. He also played a season in Japan and now owns and operates a production company. So a lot to look forward to next week on the minor side with Anthony Serratelli. Our goal, just to loop everyone in here, is to shoot for Tuesdays. So Tuesdays for the minor side, a new episode every Tuesday. But I should say, just like sometimes on the minor side, one time a few Aprils ago, we'll say, not too many years ago, I walked into the ballpark in the morning and they said, today's halfway to Halloween night. And I said, no, that's been taken off the calendar months ago. But there was just this one group, I guess, that was only coming to the game for halfway to Halloween night. So we made halfway to Halloween night. That's just what we do. Point is, on the minor side, you just never know. So in cases like that, please make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show pages at The Minor Side on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and wherever you are listening to this podcast, and you'll never miss a beat. Or a surprise theme night, of course. And if you're listening to this as it is originally released, we thank you so much for your support. We've gotten some great feedback on the show so far. I actually got a note from the service that we use to host, and they've seen some pretty good spikes from us when we do release episodes, so definitely thank you for that. Of course, appreciate the feedback online as well. Would love to respond to any questions or comments that come up on the shows. We also thank Promotional Adventures, of course, for presenting this episode of The Minor Side of Life. The baseball offseason is here. Make sure whoever does the giveaway ordering in your office gets in touch with Dustin at promotionaladventures.com. Dustin is knowledgeable, experienced, and creative, and it's no wonder they've been helping so many teams for so many years at Promotional Adventures. Also, we are just days away from the newly minted Innovator Summit in El Paso, Texas, so definitely looking forward to a lot of good talks there. And we just got an updated agenda, and I'm very much looking forward to the Mountainside Chat with Jim Paul, who, as we have briefly talked about here on the minor side, was pretty much the father of the promo seminar. Also, the Iron Pigs own Zach Betkowski is on a panel talking about getting buy-in from the office and creating events to establish that sort of culture. So that should just be a dynamic experience as well. In regards to this episode, we can get to it. As far as a formal introduction, Brian Radle is currently the Director of Partnerships at the Philadelphia Wings of the National Lacrosse League. He began this position this past spring after about 15 years in minor league baseball, getting it all started with a number of years spent in indie ball for an ownership group called Opening Day Partners. And Brian spent a number of years under that same ownership group and bounced around to a few of their teams as he was cutting his teeth in the industry. Roles in Camden, Lancaster. It's Lancaster, not Lancaster. and the Southern Maryland Blue Crabs. From there, he transitioned to one of his longest tenures at the Wilmington Blue Rocks. Of course, Single A in the Carolina League. He spent 4 years as director of corporate sales, and then moving on up within that same ownership group, Main Street Baseball, he became assistant GM for the Lowell Spinners. He did that for just a season when he became GM for a team back in the Carolina League that had a lot of new opportunities on the horizon. Or so it seemed, I guess, and he became GM of the Kannapolis Intimidators. And Brian, as we bring you on now, I believe we met at last year's promo seminar when you presented on and gave the most impassioned case for a golden bobblehead or most any minor league sports award I've ever seen with your presentation on Cam's Clubhouse. Really a signature of yours within the industry, and I know it's very personal for you, and of course I look forward to talking with you about that. We do have a lot to cover, so let's get started. You've got the lacrosse season coming up in Philadelphia. What do you have going on today? What's going on in the planning for that? I know it's a couple of months away.
Yeah, so just really getting ready for the lacrosse season here with the Wings, and I thank you for having me on, and you did get the correct pronunciation of Lancaster. You got to be careful, with some of these communities. If you pronunciate the wrong way of saying it, they'll let you know about it. And that was certainly one that I found out early on, and through all the years and different stops, picked up different ways of saying things, and especially in New England, then down to the South in North Carolina. So I'm here in the lacrosse space now, and to me, it's pretty exciting. I've always been one to, I guess, gravitate towards situations where you can really make a name for yourself. And, that was kind of my deal there with some of the stops there in minor league baseball, into this opportunity that I'm at now with lacrosse. But actually just had some pretty interesting conversations today with some big brands in the lacrosse space where the Wings just happen to have two of the faces of the sport of lacrosse in Trevor Baptiste and Matt Rambo. And just working with those brands that they're signed with on ways that we can create more synergy between our brands and rally around those two players. So it's just a unique stuff that I haven't necessarily done in my career yet, and just diving into those opportunities.
Well, so tell us about that, especially in your role in corporate partnerships right off the bat. It doesn't seem like it's the traditional approach that we may think of in terms of what your inventory is. Obviously, in minor league baseball, generally speaking, we wind up marketing the players far more when they've moved on versus when they're actually playing in our building. Obviously, just the nature of it. But you've mentioned two guys right away that you're all in on, so to speak. And so to start, I'm sure there are similarities in terms of how you sell the game presentation aspect, the entertainment, the experience. But I know you guys are in the Wells Fargo Center, and you're about to debut the first Kinetic 4K video board in the world, which I can't honestly believe we haven't kind of seen something like that yet. But yet it's a moving 4K video display, and I know we'll get into that. But again, just really to give us a broad view here before we dig in, what are some of the major differences between your approach in indoor professional lacrosse versus minor league baseball?
So you have guys like Matt Rambo and Trevor Baptiste who, these guys are also currently playing in a whole other league, the PLL, the Premier Lacrosse League, which launched this summer, where their whole approach is kind of having this traveling league at about 10 different cities where they're taking the best lacrosse players in the sport. And it's basically like a traveling all-star exhibition. And so both Trevor and Matt play in that league with a couple other guys that are on our roster. And over the summer, they had their all-star game. And they kind of took an approach similar to the NBA where they had two captains then pick the teams. And those two captains just happened to be Matt and Trevor. And it was a really cool opportunity for us where we essentially have two faces of the sport of lacrosse on our roster. And so from a marketing perspective, we're really going to rally behind those two guys. And when it comes to brands, it's kind of a unique situation as well, where Trevor is a New Balance Warrior guy, and Matt is an Epic lacrosse guy. So they're obviously competitors, but we can have those kinds of conversations with those brands to formulate partnerships where we can do some really creative things, and we can create some really engaging content, provide really good access to our players, to provide more experiences for lacrosse players, young lacrosse players. And that feeds into what we're trying to do with our brand and our product. Very similar to minor league baseball, where the accessibility is at a higher level, and we certainly want to provide memorable experiences for our fans. So just kind of some examples of, where there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences as well.
Sure. And I knew that was sort of a loaded question for sure, but just I feel like this is a great opportunity to just learn the landscape of what you're doing now. So in terms of professional lacrosse, I know there's Major League Lacrosse, which is outdoors, and you're in the National Lacrosse League. And like we mentioned, you play your games in the Wells Fargo Center, which of course is the same building as the Flyers and 76ers. So a lot of seats to fill. So that said, I guess kind of walk us through the business of the Wings.
Sure. So, so we're owned by the Philadelphia Flyers in Comcast Spectacor, and we play in the Wells Fargo Center. Basically, use the same rink as the Flyers. It's just with turf on it, and you're starting to see where the National Lacrosse League, there's kind of a business model now that's being adopted and replicated by NHL teams, where there's a team in Denver that's also owned by the Avalanche. There's a team in Toronto that's also owned by the Maple Leafs. Buffalo, where the Sabres own that team. So you're starting to see a lot of NHL teams come on board because it really works for them. And it's easy for them logistically in operating out of those arenas and just balancing their schedules between the two of them. But our season runs December to April. So in those winter months, so it's an indoor game. It's extremely popular in Canada. And just starting to come, down into America more and more. Different style than what you would see in the outdoor game, where it's a lot more physical because it's a little bit more of a condensed field than the outdoor game. But nonetheless, it's where we're at, and it's really good for us because I think we're in an excellent position to succeed with the Flyers ownership. We have shared resources. Everything from ticket sales to marketing to game presentation, the whole 9 yards. So it really just puts us in a good position to succeed. And we had 11,000 fans. Was the average attendance in the first year last year. So I think we're only just scratching the surface here.
Oh, very nice. Good for you guys. I'm excited for you. I was excited when I saw you did get this opportunity, and I know it was long and an interesting road to get to where you are now. So let's talk about it. You got out of college, and first I saw that you had a degree in, I saw that it was something that I don't know. It wasn't exactly related to sports management or sales, right?
Yeah, it was criminal justice.
Criminal justice, yes. How did that work?
So I took a pretty unconventional path in my sports career. Once I got out of college, I went to LaSalle University here in Philadelphia, and I started working with juvenile delinquents in North Philadelphia, and got out of that for reasons you can imagine. But I got a sales job from there with AmeriQuest Mortgage, who at the time it was like they had a naming rights deal to Texas Rangers Stadium. And I did that for about 6 months or so. And I said, you know what? I've always wanted to work in sports. Might as well give it a shot. And I sent my resume out to all the teams in Philadelphia. And I got one call, and that was with the Camden River Sharks, which was right across the river there in New Jersey. They were an independent team, no longer existing there, but they had a really great run there in Camden. Started out in corporate partnerships, was able to get a full-time position just based off of, I think, even my sales experience, even though it was brief. It was certainly a foot in the door. I really just tried to grind it out. I remember in that first interview, the question was asked of where you see yourself in 10 years. And immediately right out of my mouth was general manager. And that for me was, it was my dream job. It was something that drove me every single day, and just went on a path from there towards accomplishing that goal.
And you did eventually get there, but of course, like you said, and I'm sure it was a grind to do it. And I'm always not amazed, but somewhat surprised by the number of people that want to be a general manager. And give me a second, because that may sound weird, just because in theory everybody should, want the number one job and aspire to be have the number one job in a company to a degree. But what I mean is more so when they see the work that actually goes into being the GM. I guess I'm surprised it doesn't scare more people off, and I guess to a degree it does with turnover and such. But I just feel like when you get close to it, it's, I don't know, a little less glorious than it might seem, really. You're not making trades and stuff like that. You're running a business. I guess it pays better, though. But either way, I guess talk about the drive to achieve a professional goal like that. I feel like so many times we see people, I guess wash out, for lack of a better word, and they have these big dreams, and then it comes to actually working for it, and then it's like, I don't know. I don't know if it's the compensation or the time, whatever the case might be, but they're giving up and they're going on to something else. What was different about you, and did you notice that as well?
100%. And it's interesting that you say that. That was always something. Actually, I'll back up a little bit. In my first year in Camden, I was, I had a meeting with an insurance company, and the contact there used to be in minor league baseball. He was an assistant GM, and I asked him why he got out of it. He said, "I'll give you a little bit of advice. You'll figure out within the first 3 years of working in baseball whether or not you want to make it a career or not. The 3 years will give you plenty of time to really get exposed to everything that goes into that profession." And to this day, I always value those words, and I've shared those words with plenty of interns and staff members over the years. That I think it's very true. That certainly allows somebody enough time to really experience what goes into it, and you can make that conscious decision of whether or not you want to make it a career or not. And for me, after 3 years, I was totally all in. And it was something that I truly loved. And I always considered it a lifestyle. And I listened to one of your earlier episodes with Todd Parnell, and he was saying some things along those lines that really resonated with me, that for somebody like himself that's been in the industry for over 30 years, it's your life. It's a lifestyle. And you love it. It's. I think you're just wired a certain way. You don't ever look at going to the ballpark as a job. It's something that you truly love and you're passionate about. And in minor league baseball, it really gives people the opportunity to be creative and innovative and share experiences with fans and make a difference or be part of something bigger than themselves. And I always loved that. And that was always something that made it easy for me in my path and staying committed to it. And I would say on top of that, having a good spouse certainly helps. When I first met my wife and we're talking about working in baseball, and she said, "You know what, Brian, wherever this road takes us, whether it's Iowa or Texas or California, I'm with you for the ride." And she always held true to that. And that was a big part of my journey as well. Because Lord knows we kind of lived a nomadic lifestyle for a long time. And I dragged her through, I would joke to people that I dragged her through 5 different states in our 5-year marriage. But I think that certainly helps. But I think it's just embracing the lifestyle. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You have to make sacrifices, personally, financially, giving up your weekends and putting your social life on the back burner. But to me, it was something, the rewards out of the job really exceeded all of that. And the experiences that I've had over those 15 years are stuff that I'll cherish for the rest of my life.
It's funny to hear, we always say we're in the memory making business, but for a lot of it, we're making memories for ourselves as well. I always imagine indie ball to be a fountain of memories and stories, more so for the people that work for their teams. Tell me what that was like.
Yeah, sure. So I guess starting at the beginning, Camden was tough. And at the time it was a dangerous city in America for like 3 years running and probably is still in the top 5 or top 10. And you had you're in the shadow of Philadelphia. So you talk about adversity, you talk about competition, and there was even a prison right across the street from the stadium.
Is that where they sent the fans?
Well, some people could argue that. And then you had the at the time, I think it was called the Twitter Center. It was a big concert venue.
Sure. The BB&T Pavilion today now holds about 20,000 people.
They own the rights to the parking lot. So, like when you'd have like a Dave Matthews Band concert coming in on the weekend, you'd lose all your parking lots, and you'd have these drunk college kids that have been tailgating all afternoon walking around. And so you're trying to have affordable family entertainment, and their experience coming to the ballpark, they have to find this alternate parking, which could be across the street from a prison in the dangerous city in America, and you have drunk college kids walking all around. So that could impact somebody's their experience at the ballpark before they even step foot in the building. But nonetheless, it was something I was always grateful for, because nothing came easy. Nothing was given to you. Nobody was calling us. You had to go out and get everything yourself. You really had to grind. And so for me, that was always something that I was grateful for, to start out in that type of environment rather than one where things were easy. And I really thought it was like a baptism by fire. And literally sat there with a phone book, and I was able to triple what I did in year 1 to year 2. And then from there, it was the ownership group. The funny thing about the Atlantic League at that time was you had one group that owned about 4 teams in that league, which is pretty unorthodox. But that's the way that they were set up at the time. And they also owned the ball club out in Lancaster. And at the time, they were entering year 5. So they had a lot of those initial deals, partnership deals, about to expire. And so the ownership approached me about going out to Lancaster and assisting with that process to extend and continue the momentum there in that marketplace, and saw it as a good growth opportunity. So I was out there for about 5 years. And so I always found that interesting because, in Camden, you were a very small fish in a very big pond. And then Lancaster, which, if anyone's unfamiliar, is also like Amish country. You were a really big fish in a really small pond. But it was great because that community really embraced that team. Even though it was independent, you didn't have the top prospects. At the end of the day, the business model was very similar to minor league baseball, where it was all about affordable family entertainment. You'd have some guys coming through there that were former big leaguers. I remember Carl Everett, which I totally took the opportunity to engage him in a conversation on dinosaurs, because if you remember.
Yes, you just made my day. Yes.
Yeah. He just believed that they didn't exist. So I was like, I have to, take this opportunity or I'll regret it. And it was a pretty entertaining, like 8 to 10 minutes conversation there with Carl. But so you have a couple of those guys. And again, it was just about access. Right. I mean, you get a greater level of access to players than you necessarily have at the major league level. And it's just all about affordable family entertainment. So we had some fun there. We did some cool things. One of my favorites was, if you've ever seen the show Band of Brothers, Dick Winters, one of the main characters, was from Lancaster. I was able to work on this one night where it all started with a family there. The 13-year-old, he was selling these wristbands, hang tough, which was Dick Winters' motto. And he raised like $15,000 on his own just selling these wristbands. And the thing really snowballed, where the end result was we had this really cool collaboration celebrating Dick Winters. and the Easy Company band of brothers. We had 3 of the original Easy Company veterans and 3 of the actors from the HBO series there at the ballpark. We did it on June 6th, which was a Monday at the time.
D-Day. We
had all kinds of World War II memorabilia, vehicles, time period singers, custom uniforms, the whole 9 yards. And we raised about over $20,000 for the Dick Winters Memorial Fund. And it was on a Monday. We had a sellout crowd. And it was just something that, I always, cherish those memories and where it totally transcends baseball, where you're doing stuff on higher levels and really making an impact. So that was pretty cool. And from there, the ownership also owned a team down in Southern Maryland, and they approached me about an assistant GM position. So I went down there for a little bit and worked with that team in an assistant general manager role. And at the time, quite frankly, I had always had a desire to be in minor league baseball. And I saw an opportunity with the Wilmington Blue Rocks, director of advertising sales, and interviewed with them and got a position with Wilmington. And that got me my start in minor league baseball.
And you spent so much of your time and certainly your main job functions on the corporate sales side. And you spend these 4 years in Wilmington, which is Wilmington, Delaware, by the way. It's a Royals affiliate, of course. And when I was in Northwest Arkansas, I always was kind of 50-50 on whether it was Wilmington, North Carolina or Delaware. Either way, you were in Delaware. And then you became AGM, as they say, in Lowell. So one step closer to fulfilling your dream from a decade or so earlier. A lot of time it is salespeople, corporate salespeople, that are able to bring in the big dollar contracts and to get to those AGM and GM roles. In regards to the other parts of the business, how did you pick up the other pieces of the business and to what extent?
Yeah, that's another thing I loved about minor league baseball was that in most cases, you're not so siloed and you're put in a position where you can put your fingerprints on many different parts of the operation. And if you're hungry enough and you exhibit the desire to be involved in many different things, you can pick up more responsibilities. And I always remember one of my first bosses is Brad Sims, who was he was a chief revenue officer for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and most recently now I believe he's either CEO or president of NYCFC. And he was always a very influential guy for me. And he said he would sit down with his boss at the end of every season, and he'd ask for more responsibility, better pay. And he'd say, sometimes you get A, not B. Sometimes you get B, not A. And sometimes you get A and B. Sometimes you get nothing. But you don't get it unless you ask. And that was something that always, was something I carried with me. And over the years, although my primary role was corporate partnerships, I always had a desire to accumulate more and more responsibility and just be involved in other aspects of the operation. So over the years, I was able to do that. Everything from marketing to ticket sales to stadium operations, you name it. Even in Lancaster, there was a colleague of mine. We were this is like years ago, but we could understand the growing value of analytics. And we did some pretty cool stuff at the time that really increased our online ticket sales, in our website and how we were doing things on a digital side. And it was kind of finding opportunity zones too, where, you can show more value to the organization. If they're not necessarily doing something in a certain space, that, if you can kind of express how you'd like to be involved in that and what you can do and kind of, present a mini business plan, that was always something I would seek out too. And I guess the one thing I would add to that too is leadership styles, where through my many different stops, I was able to learn from different GMs. And for me, it was always important. I would pay close attention to it of things that I could pick up and learn from them and incorporate into my own leadership style. And I would say whenever the time came, and that would help me in the long run there.
Yeah. So give me some examples of leadership styles then where you were like, God damn, that's the way it ought to be done. And, conversely, where it was the total shits.
I think, you could easily look back to, that chart that you usually see on LinkedIn where the difference between a leader and a boss. And so I've had a few where, they checked a lot of boxes on the boss category and others checked a lot on the leadership category. But I could say, probably one of the best, that particular individual from a leadership standpoint was really good at just showing faith in you and encouragement and not standing in your way, trusting your abilities to get the job done and to continue to grow. And they would just, they'd be there to support you. And they cared about your well-being. They cared about you growing and supporting you growing, whether it was with that organization in long-term or elsewhere. And that was one of the best, I thought. Also, I would add on understanding time. As we evolve as a society and work environments and cultures, minor league baseball, we all know, is a grind. And you make a lot of sacrifices. You're there for a lot of hours. I think having a leader that understands that and creates a little bit more balance and doesn't take so much from the employees is one that's, I think, is always great. On the flip side of that, where you have a leader that's always cracking the whip, and doesn't necessarily recognize that could create some unfavor towards that.
Sure, and honestly, just from where I sit, which is all the way up in the nest of the building, but generally it seems to be a tightrope act moving forward, just based on the first year hires coming in compared to their own expectations, what they're expecting from what they think work is going to be, and maybe just life in general versus what we can offer them in the sports and entertainment industry. It becomes a wake-up call to sort of how things actually are. Where they might think you're cracking the whip, but really, and we talked about it before, it's just a balancing act because we appreciate the grind, the lifestyle, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, we recognize it's nice to have some time off too. So it's just a tightrope. And like I said, I think it is getting tighter though, meaning less room on either side as time goes on.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and as people get older and their priorities change, people start having families, and kids and a spouse. I always think back throughout the years, and I think any team could do the same thing, and they look back on all the great individuals that they've worked with that ultimately, maybe left sports or left the team. Like you said at the very beginning, you kind of get burnt out. And what if it wasn't that way? What if teams were able to keep those people longer and put them in a position where they can continue to grow and make more of an impact and just have some of that balance? How much better we would be as an industry. You kind of think about that. I think, especially in the sports industry, you want to find people that are really committed and have that drive, or self-starters that don't necessarily need to be pushed. That you can ideally just be able to just focus on putting them in a position to succeed, and then kind of getting out of their way. Then from there, being there to help them, support them, and kind of coach them, so that they can grow and develop. That was always what I personally focused on. And
so you really had a chance to do that in Lowell as assistant general manager for a season where more officially, I suppose, you were in a position to hire and mentor individuals across the whole organization. What was your season like there? And more so, how previously, if a promotion or fundraiser or whatever it was, if that piqued your interest, you kind of had the luxury of showing a commitment to learning more about it and then showing a willingness to actually participate in its execution. But now when you're in Lowell, it's in the job description and maybe an everyday responsibility.
I think I could even start by, on the last point, there was a favorite success story of mine where, you talk about an unconventional path into baseball or sports. We had a particular individual that we were looking for a group sales position. And this individual there in Lowell, they were working at a car dealership, and they just had a real desire to work into sports. Just didn't necessarily have an opportunity to do so, and was really looking for an opportunity. And the more and more I chatted with them, that I could see that there was really something there underneath the hood. And he did really good for us. And now he's in a pretty good position there with the Miami Heat. And it was just another one that I felt good about, where just identifying, a good person and then trying to put them in a position to succeed, and then just helping them grow, whether it's with your team or elsewhere. But that was always one I felt good about, and a couple other individuals there that have moved on with some other teams or elsewhere that are continuing to grow and do well. I always felt good about that, and being in that position to do that and lead and help them. We saw some really good growth there in Lowell, particularly in ticket sales while I was there. We had certain goals about sellouts, and we were hitting some of those goals and mini plan sales. And it was a really cool feel because it was a team effort when we were there. And of course it was a short A ball club, so you had people wearing many different hats. I think we only had 2 people that were just totally dedicated to ticket sales. Most of that group, even our groundskeeper, was doing group sales. And for me, it was a great challenge, and one that I think Wilmington helped me out with working with different personalities. Because just to rewind quickly back to Wilmington, we had 6 different people selling advertising sales. So the general manager, the assistant general manager, the director of broadcasting, director of marketing, director of community relations, director of merchandise. I think it's just human nature. So, some people have a real interest in sales, and others not. They're really focused on their primary job function. That was a challenge that I embraced, to be able to work with those individuals and get the most out of those individuals, see what motivated them, and just work with them. And we did some really good things there in Wilmington. We increased our numbers, I think, every year that I was there. But it was a whole team effort. And that's the one thing I tried to really carry with me to Lowell. So even your groundskeeper, it's and we're really good friends to this day. That he's now gotten out of baseball, but we still talk all the time. And it's usually about, Patriots and Eagles stuff. And I still remind him when the Eagles, beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl and stuff like that. They don't want to let that go. Yeah, it was a fun challenge for me, working with those individuals and getting to know them on a personal level, and just trying to put them in a position to succeed, which ultimately would help the ball club succeed. And on a marketing side, we had some fun. We did some fun things, and 2 of them I thought were really cool. Lowell was known for some creative bobbleheads. They're a Red Sox affiliate, and that particular season, if you remember, it was the Win, Dance, Repeat celebrations that they would do in center field. So you had JBJ in center, and he would do the jumping like he was ski jumping, right? And then Benintendi would do the Michael Jackson, and then Mookie Betts would do the Carlton. And it just so happened all 3 of those were alumni of the Lowell Spinners. And we did this creative bobblehead set. And I still have the sketches that I sketched out of the bobbleheads for the concepts. But we put Benintendi in the Michael Jackson dance pose and put him in a red leather jacket, the Thriller jacket, in like a sequin glove. We had JBJ in this like obnoxious ski jacket from the 80s in the ski jacket pose, and then Mookie, was like dressed like Carlton Banks from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And so it was 3 separate bobbleheads, but they all fit together, and we saw tremendous success with that. And it was just some fun things that we were able to get some really good PR in a market where it's tough, in Boston. And so we had a lot of fun there, and I felt good about my time there.
And I do remember that summer, and it does seem like a long time ago in Boston now. And, you just put it on a tee for me, Brian. I appreciate that, because it sounds like a great project for Promotional Adventures. They, of course, specialize in the most creative of bobbleheads and all sorts of custom polyresin designs for giveaway items like statues, garden gnomes, stadium replicas. How about even plastic figurines like the old starting lineups? piggy banks? What about snow globes? Especially if we got our thinking caps on for great Christmas-themed ticket package items, head on over right now to promotionaladventures.com for their full catalog of novelties, bags, apparel, and of course a whole lot more. You're bound to come away with your team's next great idea. While I'm sure drawing your concept out might work too, you probably won't even need to. Dustin and his team have been in the business of producing these items for years, and he knows exactly the quickest and most affordable way to get your item done, the right way and on time. Get in touch with Dustin at Promotional Adventures right now with your promo item list, or just shoot him a quick question. He is responsive and would love to help you on your next project. Shoot him an email at dustin@promotionaladventures.com. Again, dustin@promotionaladventures.com. And Brian, so now you've worked on giveaway items at this point, you've worked on community relations projects, and you can at least talk to the grounds crew. Some people I know are quite frankly scared to talk to people and have relationships with people who do things they know nothing about it. You know, you kind of see it. They'd rather stay in a bubble, so to speak. But you branched out and you put your own self in a position to run a minor league team. And earlier you mentioned it was all you ever wanted to do. So how long was the actual search?
There really wasn't a search. So I was only there in Lowell for a year. And in September, right at the end of the season, I had gotten an email out of the blue from a representative of an ownership group. And they had reached out to me to see if I was curious in exploring a president and GM role with a team in North Carolina. And I said, yeah, sure. And we just had some conversations, and one thing led to another. And I was presented with the opportunity there in Kannapolis. And I've always tried to go about things under the belief that you work hard and good things happen. And certain people notice the work that you do and the way that you go about yourself. And I think that played a role in that too, where it wasn't something that I was necessarily looking for. And it just kind of found me.
So now you have this opportunity, and I'm not busting balls or anything, but legitimately, and I love it. You say you work hard and good things happen, which I totally agree with. But it doesn't quite always break that way. At least, it doesn't appear to. And between Cam's Clubhouse and the promotions that you ran there and the partnerships that you created there and the negotiations around the new ballpark, at the end of the day, you just missed out on the groundbreaking, and it was just one season and ended too soon, just in so many ways.
Yeah, you're right. And so basically what happened was the ownership group that had hired me, they then sold the team to a new group, and that particular group came in and they expressed that I think it's a similar kind of thing. I think in a lot of different situations where there's an ownership change, and we had those real conversations with each other, and I could sense that maybe they had a desire to bring in some of their people. And I said, you know what, then it's all good, and kind of got at a crossroads for myself, and then was able to take a step back, really look at big picture. And I had a lot of conversations. I really try to seek out people that had worked in minor league baseball, had gone on to different sports within the industry, and have some conversations with them. And I would say to myself that I think you've been able to accomplish a lot in your career in minor league baseball. And what if you were to be on a different stage or a bigger stage, and what could you do there? And also, quite frankly, I'm from Pennsylvania. My wife is from Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia, and the thought of getting back home was attractive to us as well. And I actually was at the winter meetings in Las Vegas and met an individual from the company I work with now. And we were just sitting at a table, and we just started chatting, and we kept in touch. And he had reached out to me about this opportunity here, and one thing kind of led to another as well.
And I'll be honest, before we got to talking, when I saw that you were no longer there, it wasn't until we scheduled this where I looked into it, like the groundbreaking of the new stadium in Kannapolis, and then saw some other articles, even some of your tweets from that time. We leave no stone unturned here on the minor side. But seriously, I thought that you basically left and for personal reasons or whatever, maybe just wanted to be closer to home. And then I was like, wait a second. And I was pretty much shocked that it wasn't a choice that you made, just because even in that 1 year alone, what you were starting to accomplish down there, and with so much more going on there in terms of stadium groundbreakings and naming rights, that it was what I'd say was a questionable move, based on what the momentum you were creating and the experience that you had. And it definitely took me by surprise, as well as even more recently.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I share your feeling. But the world works in funny ways, and I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. Even in life, everything happens for a reason. And I think me and my family have gone through a lot of adversity. My youngest child has autism, which would fueled the whole Cam's Clubhouse, and my oldest son had brain surgery, and so we endured a lot on a personal level as a family. And then with all of that, it's. We have a family mantra. Of course, we're Sixers fans, but we say trust the process, and that's something that with some personal reflection, it just sticks with me. Take it as everything happens for a reason. I think that there's probably some more big things, fun things down the road, and fun challenges down the road, and I just kind of put my faith in God and where He takes us on our path.
And we've alluded to Cam's Clubhouse a few times now, and beyond awards and what have you, this concept was certainly personal for you and impactful for so many others. And we're in an industry it's always trying to be sort of trend setting, but when it's done what I'd say the right way and with a just purpose, that's really kind of why we do this. And like I said, for you, it's a personal deal, and I hate to have you repeat stories and such, but for those that may be unfamiliar with what we're talking about with Cam's Clubhouse, can you tell us what that is?
Sure. I mean, it's something I'll forever be extremely proud of. And so we chatted about it briefly there at the promo seminar. I think probably one of the first things I said was, I think in life, we don't necessarily think about certain things until we're personally affected by them. And that's what I really think of with Cam's Clubhouse, where my youngest son, Cam, was diagnosed with autism at a very young age. He's nonverbal. He's starting to say more and more things now, but still not at a level where he's talking yet. But he's progressing. And it's really actually fun to watch and fascinating to me. So, it flipped our world upside down. Working in baseball, it was always important for me to try to have my family there at the ballpark as much as I could. But we also saw that, even simple things like going to Target became a huge task. It kind of opened my eyes on how inclusive or not inclusive we are at ballparks and arenas. Because even having my boys there and my wife there at the ballpark, there was times where Cam would have a meltdown and he would struggle, but there was always a quiet place for us to take him, whether it was in my office or just, in a suite or just, in the front office or in general. And of course, the front office always knew, kind of the deal with Cam. We started to say to ourselves, what if we could provide that for everybody, that parents of special needs children, and we had gone to an NBA game. We were reluctant to take Cam, but we decided to take him, and we did. And he had a meltdown. And I'll always remember, we were asking us, is there anywhere we can go, a quiet place we can go where he can just kind of hit the reset button? And they were basically telling us, like, you're SOL. And Cam found solace in a concrete corner off this part of the concourse, and it just kind of crushed me. And so that's where it really triggered for us to really take action on this. And I thought we had a pretty good platform to do it. And we had some conversations with the local hospital and the Autism Society of North Carolina, because we wanted to do this thing right. And we wanted to build a space where there was a place for special needs children to go if they got overwhelmed. And really just make our ballpark more inclusive to people, because, as I was personally affected by it, and I say even going to Target, you may be really reluctant, let alone go to pay money to go see a sporting event. And I think we could open up a lot more doors. we were able to build a space and outfit it with the help of the Autism Society of North Carolina and the hospital. And I didn't want to be generic about it. I think storytelling is very important in what we do. And what I personally saw was Cam had developed a lot over the years. There, just being at the ballpark, he became much more comfortable and he was developing in front of our eyes. And we wanted to have the same kind of story with other kids at the ballpark. Designed for the Philadelphia Union, and he created this kind of like digital version of Cam. And so we called it Cam's Clubhouse to put a story behind it. And he even had like a part of the wall where any kid that was in the space could sign their name on the wall. And I had this big vision of the wall just being totally covered with names of people that we could see that had experienced and benefited from the space. And we got some national media attention out of it. And we ended up being the first team in minor league baseball to have a fully dedicated sensory-friendly space. And we also impacted a lot of people in that first year and also throughout the industry. And I love seeing other teams and other venues starting to have it. The Eagles just announced a couple of weeks ago that now they're having a fully dedicated sensory-friendly space. And so now you're seeing it at the NFL level, and it's just something that I think for the rest of my life, we'll feel really good about. And just as parents, we're embracing what we have with Cam. We know that he's special, and we'll be committed for the rest of our lives of just trying to make his life and any kid with special needs, a life a little bit better for them.
And, in a nutshell, you hope it is a legacy that lives on, like you say, and the trend continues. And it's another thing that you just wonder, like all just great ideas, how did we not have this before? And it just takes somebody at all levels with a vision and, like you said, inspiration to do it. And then, of course, to actually do it and do it right.
Yeah. And thank you. And I thank you for just sharing that story with people and giving me the platform to be able to share it with you today.
Well, that's the least obviously we can do, and of course it's our pleasure. And what was some other feedback you received? I'm sure it must have been meaningful.
Yeah, ever since that broke, there had been people that had reached out to me all along since then. And just, it was always cool to see people just say that, oh my God, I love it. And, I really respect what you guys are doing. And then people having the conversations of asking how we did it and to be able to share that part of it as well, because I think it's a very important element. You don't want to be ignorant about it. You want to do it right.
And let me ask you, the room, was it a suite? Was it an office, a converted office? What was the actual room?
So most ballparks, our suites are probably like 20 people on average, your common suite. So I'd say about the size of two of those suites that can kind of paint a good picture for people. But, at Kannapolis' ballpark, it was actually just an underutilized space. It was on our suite level, but it was what used to be one of the old owners' like personal office. And we didn't really have any office members in that space. And so it just happened to be a natural fit where even right outside of that room was a stairwell down to the main concourse. So there was easy access to it, even though it was on the suite level. The room itself, we had the Autism Society come in and they just kind of walked through it with us and just really just kind of gave us the tips on everything from the paint color to the items that we had in the room. And it actually did have a little window that it was just ideal that you could still see out into the concourse. And I think even for parents, that was a big thing too, where if you're a parent of a special needs child and you're in that space but you're being taken away from the game, that you can actually still see the game. And it did have a clubhouse feel, but it doesn't have to. I think the biggest thing is just a space, just something I think goes over a long ways, where it's just even an opportunity for that child to be able to hit the reset button a little bit. We had some real success stories even that year with some fans, and one in particular, the season ticket holder. I got to know that family really well and really enjoyed seeing them at the ballpark where their son was, he was autistic and he loved the fireworks, but they would always have to go out to their car because it was too loud. It was too overwhelming for him. And there was one day, I'll never forget it, towards the end of the season, the dad came up to me and he had tears in his eye. And he said that he watched the fireworks for the first time in the ballpark. And he could see his son, something, like a light switch went off with him, that he could see that I can handle this. I can do this. And just had this huge smile on his face. And I said that right there, that's what it's all about. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't take much. It just takes people just prioritizing it a little bit, and just having some kind of space that's accessible, easily accessible from the main concourse, and just is outfitted, the right way.
And of course, the idea itself, the implementation, and you as well, a credit to, and I'm sure that the community and minor league baseball in general are really your credit to, and in so many ways, it's sort of a shame that minor league baseball doesn't have you anymore. I'm sure that you have your relationships, of course, but in general, the idea sort of lives on, and just all these other inclusive initiatives are picking up steam. So too will this organic one. So with that though, and maybe with that in mind, I'll ask you the same question that they asked you 15 years ago in Camden. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
That's a good question. I don't have an immediate answer like I did at that time, but in Philadelphia, it's pretty exciting with as big of a sports town as this is. Now just, networking more and working hard. And I think the company that I'm working for is an extension of Comcast Spectacor, is really spreading itself across the country and really growing rapidly in what they're doing in the sports and entertainment space. And so, I think we'll see what happens. I'm embracing the opportunity here to sink my teeth into lacrosse and do some pretty innovative things here, which I'm actually working on a couple of things I think would be innovative, and we'll see where the road goes from here.
Okay, well, we wish you a lot of luck and look forward to some of those innovations, and good luck this season in Philly. Before I let you go, just curious, did you get to any games this year?
April and May were really weird for me, but I was able to catch a bunch of Phillies games and golf on the weekends and stuff like that. But
no, well, I know you haven't been up here to the Lehigh Valley, but any minor league games.
You know what the crazy thing is? None.
Well, they give you the card. You get the card from minor league baseball, and you can go to any game you want. Hopefully you still have one, because you can go to any game you want, and it's like, oh, good. Thanks for that.
Yeah. But no, I think I was just trying to take a step back a little bit. I lied. I went down to Wilmington. Jersh there, who was the manager in Kannapolis, who was actually one of the youngest in minor league baseball, got promoted to Winston-Salem. So him and the hitting coach, Jamie, were there when they were in town playing at Blue Rocks. So I went down to see those guys, hang out with them for a little bit, and also see some of my buddies there that still work for the Blue Rocks. So I did catch one minor league game this summer.
Oh, that's right. And Jersh is actually, the older one, the first one, Mike Jersley, and I forgot about the Royals connection, because Jersh was in Omaha for so many years and now is in Kansas City. And so Justin has the gig in Wilmington then. His nephew is actually out doing promotions and entertainment in Wisconsin, Jacob Jersley. The Royals themselves, though, to me, are one of the best organizations to have an affiliate for. Just a class bunch of people, and any interaction I have with JJ Piccolo and Scott Sharp and Kyle, and it always seems to be worth mentioning here.
And so from your time in Omaha, I wholeheartly agree. That organization is just filled with good people, and certainly a strong relationship there with Wilmington. With them and the Royals. I remember we had the All-Star game in Wilmington there when I was there. And, I spearheaded the home run derby, which we did from center field, hitting into the stands, which we had a lot of fun with. And even having George Brett there, Mike Sweeney, Johnny Damon, and a couple other Royals guys. And it's just, you get to hang out with them, and it's just quality people. And I would say absolutely the same thing with the White Sox. That Getsy there, director of player development, Grace, who oversees the minor league operations. It's just really quality people, and it just makes everything so much easier when you get to work with those types of individuals.
Well, like I said, if there is an organization worth putting over here, at the end of the day, it's definitely that group there. And I was glad they've already come out and said that Dayton is going to stay on board with their own ownership change. And Brian, though, definitely thanks for taking the time today. Appreciated hearing more about your story. Good luck this season in Philly, and we'll talk to you soon, and hopefully you come back to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you having me on here. And I always love baseball, and I do miss it. So you never know.
All right, Brian Radle of the National Lacrosse League's Philadelphia Wings, and their season kicks off this December. They run December through April and stream live on BR Live, which is the newer Turner digital property that I know has some NBA and MMA and that new wrestling as well. And as we said at the Open, we look forward to next week on the minor side when we talk to Anthony Serratelli. Anthony spent about a decade in professional baseball, and as I said, a real underdog sports story in that he walked on in college, wound up hitting .500 one year in Division I baseball. He went undrafted, played indie ball, eventually climbed through the Kansas City organization, the aforementioned Kansas City organization, I should say, reached AAA in 2013. From there, he played one more year of AAA in Vegas with the Mets, and then his final season was spent in Japan. But all the while, he was also honing his craft in the film and editing and producing industry in that content world, and now owns and operates his own production company. So we look forward to hearing about what all that was like and how it all went down. Also coming up, we will talk to Jeff Brown. Jeff spent a lifetime in minor league baseball and was the GM in Lakewood from their inception through the 2012 season when he joined on the nearby Rutgers as an associate AD, really as they prepared for their move to the Big Ten. And these days he's working in the offices for the National Basketball Association. May have heard of it. He's bringing his skill set to their business, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk to him about that and hopefully a lot more. Other than that, if you liked what you heard here on the minor side, please let us know. We look forward to interacting with you. Yes, you. The show is on social media at The Minor Side on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. For me, I am at Rob Sternberg on Twitter. Thank you so much for listening. Had a lot of fun. For the details, here's the great Pete Candianis. He's a real nice guy.
This has been a presentation of The Minor Side of Life. We kindly ask for your support of this program by subscribing to the show on your preferred podcast player, joining the newsletter list at minorside.com, and following The Minor Side on social media. Plus, you can always visit theminorside.com for exclusive content and more. Thank you for listening.